All right, good. Hello, everybody. My name is Giovanni Capoletto. I am the uh, VP of Sourcing for Index Fresh, and welcome to this, our first ever Zoom marketing update for our California grower base. In the world of COVID, it is forcing us to try new things, and we have during these days of social distancing, we've all started to become much more adept at doing these video conferences, and so we decided that we could do one for our grower base. Normally, what we do is we like to do group meetings for the extended grower base preseason to tell everybody what to expect. And we do that in Fallbrook, Oxnard, and San Luis Obispo. And then after that, generally what we've done is focused on one-on-one grower meetings with our field representative and the individual grower. And we might bring out other members of staff on those meetings, but it's generally more of a one-on-one experience. This year, because of social distancing, we've been having fewer face-to-face meetings between the field staff and growers. Field staff is still working hard. Thank goodness the harvest crews are still working hard, and the packing crew at the packing house is still showing up to work every day and keeping this food moving through the supply chain. But we have been minimizing the face-to-face meeting. So we thought that the market right now in July 2020 is very complex, and we thought that this would be a good opportunity to try to do a Zoom meeting with a good portion of our California grower base to catch up with where we are in the market today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are in terms of volumes, what's going on in the market today, bring you an update on a couple of the niche products, including gems and organics, and then follow up with some strategies for the remainder of the season. So California, we have completed 250 million pounds season to date. That is about 67% of the CAC estimate of 373 million pounds. A lot of industry veterans believe that large crops get larger as you actually pull out a few more pounds per acre from each grow throughout the state than originally estimated. Some people think that we will be closer to 400 pounds, but nevertheless, we're well over the 60% mark. The split between the two year to date has been about 43% out of the south, with the balance 57% out of the north. With that said, today, July, earlier this week, we had, I think it was on Monday, 47% of that day's bin count came out of the south. So with the current heat that we've been seeing and actually an acceleration out of the south, where the growers generally do not have the luxury of extending the harvest a whole lot further into the summer. Out of Peru, we are at about 70 million pounds have come in out of the 206 million pound estimate that the Peruvians have given us. So they're over the 30% mark as well. And we'll see how that evolves over the next few weeks. They got a later start than originally projected for three main reasons. On the one hand, some of the retailers in the United States wanted to start later in order to ensure that the Peruvian fruit had adequate dry matter and that their customers had a good eating experience with the Peruvian fruit. The second reason that the Peruvian fruit got a late start was we had a higher market in Europe in March and April than we did in the United States, as the United States was going into lockdown because of COVID. Europe, which was 4 to 6 weeks ahead of us in terms of the dealing with that situation, was a little bit more of an attractive market. So they were so more of that earlier fruit went to Europe. And then the third factor, which was less expected than either of the previous two, is that the Olmos production area, which is in the far north of Peru and was originally projected to extend their season 4 to 5 weeks on the front end, did not end up having dry matter levels earlier than the rest of Peru. So instead of extending their season 4 to 5 weeks on the front end, the fruit from Olmos is coming in right on top of the fruit from the more traditional growing districts throughout Peru. Mexico is the most dominant force in the avocado market in the United States. They represent more than 80% of the avocados sold, and we are in what should be their off season. June and July is when they finish the old crop in June and begin the new crop in July. So if we remember, the Michoacan has availability for 52 weeks out of the year. They start their crop cycle in July and run that all the way through June. Some years they have more of an off season than others. And we saw that last year, where we saw that they ran out of the old crop for all intents and purposes, the critical mass at least, in May. And then they got kind of a slow start on the Flor Loca in July and really didn't hit their numbers on the Flor Loca until mid to late August. This year's completely different. This year they did not run out of old crop by any sense of the imagination. So here we are on July 10th, and this week shipments out of Mexico are going to be 90% old crop. And they ended up the crop cycle with about 150 million pounds of old crop still on the trees. So we're gonna have a blend of old crop and Flor Loca for all of July. As we get into August, the old crop should be gone, and they'll be focused more exclusively on the Flor Loca. The Flor Loca, they do have 25% more, or the projection is that they have 25% more Flor Loca than they did last year. And what does that mean for us? That's an on-tree estimate. So just because it is on the tree does not mean that it has to come off within a given window. That's one of the blessings of Hass, is that in most countries you can store it on the tree for at least a few months. You can't do that in Peru, but in Chile, California, Mexico, you can store it on the tree. If you don't like a market today, you can wait 3 or 4 months, even in the early areas. The early areas, you can't necessarily store it on the tree as long as you can in the cooler areas, but you don't have quite the pressure. So the Flor Loca estimate is 25% higher. That's for all groves, including the low altitude groves that are warmer at, say, 12 to 1,300 meters above sea level, as well as the higher altitude groves at 2,200 meters above sea level. The high altitude groves will not be chomping at the bit, so to speak, to get into the early part of the market. So just because they have 25% more Flor Loca does not mean that they have to pick that amount of fruit in any given month. How is the market evolving right now? Right now, it is a very crowded market. In March and April, there were basically 2 options for people that wanted to buy avocados. You could buy California Hass or you could buy Mexican Hass. Today, it's a very different scenario. Today, there's no fewer than 9 different options of avocados for consumers in the United States. We have California Hass, California Lamb Hass, Mexican Old Crop, Mexican Flor Loca, and Peruvian fruit. And just in case that wasn't enough, there are smaller volumes of fruit coming in from Colombia, Florida, and from the Dominican Republic. They're shipping greenskins and they're shipping Hass. So there's not a tremendous amount of volume coming from any of those other sources, but they do make noise in the market, and that fruit is being quoted, emails and such being sent all around the country. So it does have an impact when you have 9 sources versus when you only had 2 a couple of months ago. And that 9 sources erodes stability in the market. So what does that look like? Today, according to Avis, which is the Hass Avocado Board reporting mechanism, there are 70 million pounds in U.S. inventory. And that's just the people that are reporting to Avis. And those same people are selling about 45 million pounds per week. So 70 million pounds divided by 45, that gets us to about 11 days of inventory, and that's an unstable number. Just as a point of reference, if you have less than 7 days of inventory, that is generally a hot market and prices are rising. If you have 7 to 9 days of inventory, that's generally more stable. And as you get over 9 days of inventory, things get more unstable and the prices are going down. 11 days of inventory is the average. Now you have some sizes that are under 11, like the 70s and 84s right now. Those are in a little bit healthier situation. You have other sizes that are more especially from certain countries of origin, that are more in the 14 and 15 day category, and that's a real danger zone for the entire market. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, we called some of you back in March when COVID hit, and in February we thought avocados were almost untouchable. They could walk on water. It was really, really incredible what happened after the Super Bowl in February. So we got through the Super Bowl pretty well as an industry with no significant carry out of excessive inventories after the event. And then we had 3 days of rain. And those 3 days of rain caused a feeling of a shortage. They caused a market run that stuck. So we had 50 million pounds per week were moving through the system in February, and the price was over $50 on some of the sizes, and that just blew us away. And it got me worried about what could happen in the fall, because if we're moving 50 million pounds a week in the $50 range in the dead of winter after Super Bowl, what's going to happen next fall when Americans get addicted to eating 60 to 65 million pounds per week all summer long? And then in the fall, when Peru and Mexico disappear and it goes back to 95% coming from Mexico, is Mexico going to be able to sustain that demand that was created over the summertime? But then COVID hit, and COVID hit really hard to all sectors of our economy, hotels, airlines, events, and that's why we're doing this call, because all of us are social distancing as well. And avocados didn't remain unscathed. So the market fell by $20 a case, fell from the low 50s to the low to mid $30 range, and impacted even more so the number twos. So we did a round of calls to everybody to talk about that. And at the time, a number of growers asked me, "Well, Giovanni, what should we do in terms of our harvesting? Should we stop?" And my answer to that was, look, we know that this is difficult right now, but it's not necessarily going to get better in the summertime, because we knew that California had a large crop. We knew that Peru had a large crop, and we knew that Mexico had a large crop. So we knew back in March that the summer was not going to be less complex than March, despite COVID. We didn't know how long the COVID situation was going to last. So my response was, if everybody starts and stops at the same time, capriciously, that's not gonna add volatility to the market. It's not gonna add stability to the market. So my response was, we don't know what the summer looks like. We know it's gonna be crowded. The best thing to do is to know how much fruit is on the trees, know the date by which you would like to finish, and develop a strategy to finish that volume by the day you've defined. Now, within those parameters, you can accelerate or decelerate the harvest depending on what's going on, but you don't want to, if everybody in the world slams on the brakes and then at the same time, and then steps on the gas at the same time, that's going to start a roller coaster effect. And once it begins, it can do a lot of damage throughout the market. So where are we today? How is this 70 million pounds affecting the market? As I said, the small fruit is kind of holding its own. It's moving. There's not a lot of it because the fruit in Mexico has been on the tree for 18 months. It keeps growing that entire time. So they don't have a lot of small fruit on the old crop, at least. California, we're in the last third of the crop. So, our fruit has been on the tree for a long time. And there's not necessarily an oversupply of small fruit. And of course, out of Peru, they have 40% 40s and larger every year. So they never have excessive 70s or 84s. So the market right now on the 48s and larger has stayed over $30 despite the erosion of the last 10 to 15 days. Your 60s are in the high 20s, 25 to $27, and your 70s and 84s are around 20. They might actually rise despite they might be a little bit counter what's going on in the rest of the market. So that's where we are right now. And so it's going to be crowded. There's 11 days of inventory. We're heading into some period of really instability. And how do we want to address that? I'll get to that after I talk a little bit about what our experience has been this year in two of the niches, gems and organics. The gems we're just finishing. We finished the harvest 2 weeks ago, and it was a struggle. They got really hit much more directly by COVID than the Hass did, and really suffered as a result. So again, this is our third year of the gem program, third or fourth, and we put a tremendous amount of effort into making this a success with mailings to the users of specific of an actual piece of fruit, along with some of the background of it. We use bloggers, we use social media. We really throw everything at promoting the gem for the gem season. We've even worked with the industry to create its own PLU. And back in February, when everything was hot, we were getting really good feedback on people interested before COVID hit. And then everything changed. And a lot of the stores that had used the gem before told us, look, guys, we are up to our eyeballs in this COVID stuff. We're trying to figure out how to keep our employees safe, how to keep our customers safe. And we're running into some really significant challenges in how do we find enough toilet paper? How do we find enough beans, rice? And then, of course, we have the complications in the pork and poultry situation. So a lot of the retailers told us, look, we love the gem, we love what you're doing. This is just not the right time to add complexity to our produce section. So the gems, we had really significant erosion in the pricing. The good news is that the average price has been within a couple of cents of the average price of Hass. The bad news is if you look at it side by size, some of the prices have been really disappointing. The 40s and in the 80-cent range, and the 48s in the 70-cent range. And we haven't seen those types of pricing on Hass this season, and we haven't seen those types of pricing on Hass for a number of seasons. So there was definitely some disappointment on those two sizes where they really go head to head against the Hass. Where we had more success was on the 32s and 36s. It stayed up over $1.10 per pound, where they really offer, especially in that spring niche in that spring window that we were shooting for, there's not a lot of large Hass. So we had more success as an industry on the larger sizes. And again, the idea behind the gem is not to do is to augment the avocado diversity at the sales level. So we don't want to go head to head against the Hass. What we want to do is convince people that, hey, if you like avocados, this is another alternative. So in your display, you might have large Hass, small Hass, bagged fruit, and organics. You might have 4 different displays in one store. This would be a 5th display. So it's the idea behind the gem is to increase the size of the pie, not to erode the sales of any other California avocados whatsoever. We're trying to increase the number of displays that retail is giving to us in the store. A number of growers, when we had these calls, so we did a lot of calls when COVID hit, talking about how gems were impacted. And some of the growers asked us, well, is this the writing on the wall that that the future of the variety is not going to be as bright? You know, a lot of the growers went through the introduction of the Gwen avocado or the Pinkerton avocado or the Lamb Hass avocado, all of which promised to kind of be the hot new thing, opened it close to Hass pricing, and over time the returns eroded. And I said, I don't think so. I think this is really directly related to COVID. I've been eating a lot of Gwens this week, and they've been fantastic. I think that the gem offers some advantages that those other varieties did not have. And it's important to keep in mind that the Hass is a very good avocado. Why do I say that? It rose to beat out dozens and scores of other varieties to become number 1, right? And it did that not once, but twice. It did it once in California, beating out your Fuertes and your MacArthurs and everything else. And it did it again in Mexico, where it had, if anything, a much wider variety of avocado offerings in Mexico to compete against, and it rose to become the market leader. So the Hass is a very, very good avocado. The other thing I want to remind everybody is that Hass's success did not happen overnight. It was, Rudolf Hass patented his tree in 1935, and it really took until the 1970s for Hass to become the industry standard. Even as late as 1995, when I started at Index, Hass was barely 70% of what we were handling. We were still doing 30% greenskins at the time. So it didn't happen overnight. Why am I positive about the gem for the long term? 3 reasons. One is productivity. We do productivity is a particular focus of mine in California. If we are averaging as an industry 7,000 pounds per acre within alternate bearing, that means in your off year you only have 3,000 or 4,000 pounds per acre. That is not news to anybody on this phone call. That doesn't pay the water bill anymore. So productivity is key, and that's why we do the seminars. That's why we have a on-staff agronomist who goes out and visits the grows to, we're a big focus of ours is to increase per acre productivity. And I think that the GEM can play an important role in that. Second one is diversification against the imports. So the import protocols, the legal system through which avocados come in from Mexico, Peru, or Colombia are all written for Hass only. And so with California Hass, we're competing in the marketplace Hass versus Hass versus Hass. So I think that GEM offers something unique to those other countries of origin that they do not offer. And it's something we can say, this is something different. It's only from California, and it's only here for a limited amount of time. The third one is genetic diversity. That, as we having a monoculture, we all know that the Hass is more susceptible than other varieties, for instance, to the scirtothrips and the persea mite. So what happens when a new pest comes in that directly hits Hass? We need to make sure that as an industry, we have the genetic diversity so that we have the tools to combat that. Organic fruit, that is one real bright spot in the market right now that is not where the supply and demand is more in line with each other. So there's we're at the end of the season. There's little to no old crop organic fruit left in Michoacan. They got plenty of fruit left, but they don't have organic fruit left in the volume necessary to sustain the market. Peru is shipping some organic fruit, but the profile of the users of Peruvian fruit don't necessarily line up directly with the profile of the users of the organic fruit. So California is kind of left in its own little bubble that is pretty healthy right now. And moving forward, there doesn't appear right now to be any clouds on that horizon. Why is that? I said earlier that the South year to date has been about 43% of the bin count, and right now it's 47%. So they're accelerating their harvest because they can't hold on as long as some of the northern growing districts can. But in the organics, they're 70% of the year-to-date fruit. So the southern districts of Temecula, Fallbrook, Escondido, Palma Valley have been, that's where the bulk of the California organics is, much more than in Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo counties as a percentage of the fruit. And as the South winds up its harvest, I don't see the North being able to fill the gap on organics. Now, of course, there was a grower in Goleta that used to have a sign up in his office that said 2 weeks left in the South, and he kept it up year round because, every year in April and May, Southern handlers would knock on his door and say they only had 2 weeks left in the South, and then they would be looking for fruit from the North. And by golly, by the time August rolled around, the South was still dominating the bin count. So it was a little joke that he had. We don't know when, the South is going to finish up, but it doesn't look like the availability of California organics is going to increase as we move forward through the balance of the season. So the balance of the season, what should the growers watching this be thinking about as far as a strategy? We know that July is a very crowded market. Extending the season is, I think, could be a tool for those that are able to do it to take some of the pressure off of July. And I think, as I alluded to earlier, I think that as the harvest from Peru and California decline as we get into August, I think there could open up an interesting window in September and October that we have not seen in a long time. Now, it used to be common for us to hold fruit late, and Mexico's kind of closed the late window to a great extent over the last 5 or 7 years, because as the new crop comes on with the dry matter, it keeps every week they have more availability. So July you have little, August you have a little more, September you have more, and by October they really hit their stride. So in the last 5 or 7 years, September, October have been an eroding market. So it's been in our best interest as California growers to be done in August, or at least in the first half of September at the latest. But I think this year, because of the situation, I think that there could be an interesting window up here in September, October. Now, this isn't without risk, but and I'll get into that a little bit. So, every individual grower is going to make individual decisions based on their budget, of course, based on heat, based on theft, and based on the phenology of the trees, trying to get the fruit off so that the 2021 bloom can be strong. So with that in mind, again, I would go back to the idea of a strategy, knowing how much fruit you have in the grove, defining a finish date by when you would like to be finished, and then working backwards from that to come up with the harvest strategy. We know that starting in August and into September, so I talked that there's going to be less fruit available. There's going to be less from California as the South is finished. There's going to be less from Peru because they only have a 15-week window, and there won't be any old crop fruit to speak of in August, especially in the second half of August, coming out of Michoacan. So that's 3 out of the 9 flavors are going to have a lot less fruit from August 15th onwards than they have in July. So extending the season could take some pressure off of the market in July, some pressure off of the labor in July, and there could possibly be some attractive market conditions in August, September, and into October. Now, that is not without risk. There are, there's going to be heat waves. There's always a risk of theft in avocados, how it will affect the 2021 bloom. But so each individual grower has to make an individual decision, and coordinating that decision with your field rep is key to having a successful end of the season. So those are my thoughts on the 2021 California avocado market. I would like to thank you for participating in this. We are going to be sending out a survey to see what you think, and believe that this could become a regular part of our grower communications repertoire as we move forward. I think we're learning a lot of new things about efficiencies during this COVID social isolation, and I think we'll be able to carry those forward with us. So again, thank you everybody, and we'll be in touch.